the world was falling apart. Fascist Nazi shock troops of the Third Reich and their blitzkrieg had spread across Europe and northern Africa, and were marching their eastern front deep into the heart of Russia. The Empire of Japan was making its conquest of the Pacific reality. 65 million human lives would be lost. 11 million would eventually be systematically exterminated by an evil war machine like the world had never seen before. To gain a foothold into Europe and take on the armies of Hitler's Nazi Third Reich, the world needed a new elite type of soldier. The paratrooper was that soldier. Changing Hearts and Minds welcomes you to a special series dedicated to the greatest generation, and specifically the well-known story that inspired the best-selling book and HBO miniseries, Band of Brothers. Join me, Jeff Adamick, veteran of the U.S. Army where I served as a paratrooper in the 82nd, Ranger in the 2nd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, and finally as a Green Beret in 3rd Special Forces Group, as I welcome fellow veterans, other podcast hosts and personalities, and some very special guests to honor the true story, book, and television series about the greatest generation's most honored story of sacrifice, service, and leadership in the face of overwhelming evil. Lessons in Leadership, the men and history of Easy Company. Welcome to Lessons in Leadership, Band of Brothers. This is it, guys. Culmination of what's been probably 4 months of my life leading up to this very episode. And it's not like the episode's built up to this episode, but this is it. After I'm done with this, guys, you're going to get one bonus episode of all of Dale Dye's interview, and then you're not. If you don't want to listen to any more of my shows, which I hope to God you do want to listen to more of my shows, but if you don't want to listen to any more of my shows, you don't have to. You can go on your way. But you have to listen to this show, and you have to make everyone else that you know listen to this show. I'm just kidding. Welcome to Band of Brothers, Lessons in Leadership. My name is Jeff Adamick. I'm your host. And this episode, we are going to be going over the episode called Points, which is really, by the means of the actual show as it was designed, was supposed to be a part 2 of a 2-part episode. So Why We Fight was actually considered Points Part 1. Points Part 2 is actually this. If you look online and look when you go and you get the actual show and you watch it, it's not set. It doesn't say Points Part 1 and Points Part 2, but just so you know, it was initially written as Points Part 1 and Points Part 2, and this would have been Points Part 2. So here we are. And today, I've got, this is going to be kind of weird for those of you who haven't listened to any of my other shows. I have who we will call Zaphod Beetlebrock on. Zaphod Beetlebrock is not a character from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe. I mean, he is, but for the sake of our show here, he is not that character. That is the name that he is going under. And the reason why, as I've told in my other show that he's been on, the reason why we call Zaphod and not by his real name is because my brother here, who I served with in Iraq and Afghanistan, he is still working in a community and in a job where anonymity is actually his friend, and he needs to kind of stay a little bit off the wire. So if I slip up, you'll never hear it because I'll edit it up, but I'll edit it out. But I'm going to try to keep to just saying Zaphod. So, hey, brother, man, welcome to the show.
Hey, brother. Thanks for having me back, man.
Oh, yeah, and there is a reason. There is a very specific reason that Zaphod is the co-host for this episode, and when we get to that part later on in the episode, I'll talk about it. This one's going to be right down and dirty because I want to kind of get through what happens in the episode and then get right to what it means and the meanings of the show itself. As you heard in the opening, you didn't hear the veterans speaking like you had in past episodes at the beginning of the episode. The reason why you didn't hear that is because in this episode, it does not open up with the veterans speaking like it does in all the other episodes. Because as you remember in the episodes beforehand, if you've seen the show itself, you have no idea who the veterans are that are speaking at the beginning of each episode of Band of Brothers. They don't give you their names. In this episode, at the end, when they show you all those guys that you've been listening to and hearing over the weeks that you were watching the show, they finally give you their names at the bottom. And you realize that those veterans who are talking about everything that they've seen are the actual characters from the show. I will go down and give you a list of the guys who are the ones that are the surviving members of Easy Company that are the ones interviewed at the end. Before we start, Zaphod, it kills me having to do that. I want so bad to call you by your name. But Zaphod, tell us a little bit about the first time you saw Band of Brothers and what the show meant to you. And I know that there's a lot of, I think you and I on our first trip together. Actually, we got the what we call the Haji copy, and those of you who've been deployed know what the Haji copy is. That's the one that you buy from the
Yeah.
local bazaars downrange. I think we got a copy of it, and you and I sat down and watched the whole thing together. But
Yeah, we did.
so talk to the listeners a little bit about what the show meant to you and all the things that you got out of that show, and especially as a combat veteran.
Well, watching this show was really my first, let's say, adult full glimpse into kind of what was going on in the military at that time, the mindset of the guys, where that they were coming from. My grandfather was in the South Pacific in World War II, but I never really talked to him about it. I mean, I was a young kid, and I only ever knew him as an old man. He was probably 70, 71 years old, something like that, when I was born.
Right.
So by the time, I do remember, I think it was in junior high, I wrote a paper on him, interviewed him, recorded it, wrote the paper. But even then, didn't really comprehend some of the stuff. I'm sure he didn't tell me everything, because, he's not going to tell a kid of that age everything that was going on back then. But this, like I said, this was my first sort of adult glimpse into it. And it just opened my eyes that, a lot of these guys, me and you, we were in before 9/11, and 9/11 happens, and everybody kind of shifts gears, and it's like, all right, it's time to go to work. These guys were even joining, knew what was before them, and for every one of them to make that decision and say, okay, this is what we're going to do, it's just a remarkable thing.
Yeah, right. There's something to be said about the guys like yourself and myself that were in before all this happened, because before 9/11 happened, excuse me, because I really don't think even then we still got it. And like you said, this show came out. The premiere of the very first episode was days before 9/11.
Yeah.
This show was released as the United States was building up into war, and we used it as a litmus test, or almost like a how-to manual for those first couple of years that we were in, on how to deal with a lot of the stuff that we were exposed to and a lot of the things that we saw, as I think guys since then have done. But there wasn't very many of these characters who were long-term military before I mean, Colonel Sink, which is played by Dale Dye, Winters, Ron Livingston's character, who is Lewis Nixon.
Mm-hmm.
Those were characters that were in the military before the war kicked off. And
yeah, Sobel, I think, was in for a little bit.
Sobel, yeah. So these guys were people that had.
There's just a handful,
right? And I think that when you look at the amount of people that have served overseas in this past conflict, I think that we see a lot of that now too. I think most of the people that have served in this past war were not in before the war. I mean, a lot of guys got out right away after, like they got their one deployment or so, and then gone.
Right.
Then there were guys like you and I who had done multiple tours and some very long and hard tours that really did stay with us and still stay with us to this day. So
well, and you bring up an interesting point there too. So, us being in prior to 9/11, then 9/11 happens. You switch gears. You go from training and readiness to actual combat operations. We've only got that one theater though.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So these guys, I mean, it's World War, So Pearl Harbor had already happened, and then you've got everything going on with the Axis. So these guys knew that it was we didn't know Iraq was coming.
No, we really didn't. I mean, we kind of felt it there, but it was a buildup that lasted a month. Like right. they started poking it at Iraq, and then they had the big briefing that happened at the UN, and this all happened when you and I first got the third group. Then all of a sudden, I think over the span of like a week, we went from maybe we're gonna go to we were in our country that we launched out of.
Right.
Yeah, it was odd because everything was in Afghanistan, everything was all about Afghanistan, but it is the global war on terror, and unfortunately, even today, we see that the contingency operations that are going on in Africa, that it truly is a global war on terror, and that the fighting is going on everywhere. But we just didn't see it then. You're right. Yeah, we only had that one theater where the world at the time, this generation of people, they fought in everywhere from the jungles, from the deserts of North Africa, Italy, Germany,
Oh no,
France, everywhere.
they knew it was a shitstorm from the beginning. I mean, they were not at all confused, I'm sure, about the situation
Right.
globally and making that decision. And then I think one of the other things that I noticed that really impressed me, and obviously they didn't have the opportunity, but you know, 3 years and a few months. So in 3 years and a few months, you have some guys who go from private to battlefield commission. You have some guys that go from private to first sergeant. No PLDC, no promotion boards, no nothing. This is based solely on your ability in the shit to lead men.
Yeah, it says a lot about their character and a lot about the stuff they were exposed to.
It's huge. It's huge. That really struck me. They don't nowadays. You've got leadership schools and you've got everything else. They'll take time out of deployment rotations and everything else. I mean, I went to promotion board downrange. These guys aren't having promotion boards. They're walking in and saying, "Oh, hey, since we've lost
right
X amount of non-coms, you, and you, put these stripes on, get ready to go."
Right. I mean, there's no preparation or training. You're gonna learn on the move. You're gonna learn as it happens, and they did it well. Yeah, there's not guys who were perfect at it, and there's guys. Not everyone is going to be a Lipton who just seemed to get it right everywhere he went. But there's guys. I mean, these guys. You're right. It's guys like Malarkey who went from being a private, who getting yelled at the beginning, to being a platoon sergeant, as we talk about it. But there's all kinds of.
I love Malarkey's progression just through the whole thing. From nice little clean shiny dude to that salty ass platoon sergeant on the river.
Yeah,
I love it.
So let's get into we do have a character focus. There, guys, for those of you who are listening, and I know that I started sharing this show on a lot of the 101st reunion boards on Facebook, and a lot of you guys are out there listening. If you are, or if you are friends with, or if you are family members of a character that is a pivotal part of this show that I haven't done a character highlight on during the show, it's not intentional. There are far too many guys that I could talk about that I wasn't able to get to, and I just wanted to get to the focus of the individual episodes and characters in those episodes that really stood out. They're the main characters I had to do just by just not wanting to leave them out, but. Like last episode, we threw in, Perconti and O'Keefe, and we had a bunch of them that were in there. And this episode, we only have one, and it's only one because I think this particular gentleman's story is pretty impressive to me. Just not because the circumstances surrounding him were not about his skill. They were circumstances that had to do with just being lucky. At some point, he was a very skilled soldier and very good at his job. The fact that he was in the position that he was in this episode has nothing to do with any skill. It really was he just got lucky. So, Zaphon, I'm going to go ahead and let you tell everyone about this episode's character and his character focus, and a little bit about who he is and where he was from.
Well, this episode, our character focus is going to be on Staff Sergeant Darrell C. Shifty Powers. Staff Sergeant Darrell C. Shifty Powers was born in Clinchco in Dickinson County, Virginia, and he earned the name Shifty at school due to his skills on the basketball court. His father was an excellent rifle and pistol shot and taught him how to shoot when he was young. Shifty spent a great deal of time in the outdoors fishing and hunting game, and eventually got to the point where he could throw a coin into the air and hit it with a rifle. And many of these skills he obtained in his youth would come to help him as a soldier. After graduating from high school, he took a machinist course at a vocational school in Norfolk, and when the war broke out, the machinists were sent to the shipyards in Portsmouth to work on the Navy ships there. And it is here where Shifty befriends Robert Popeye Wynn. After this, when they found out that they were about to be locked into these positions, him and Popeye decided that they were going to join the Army. and he enlisted on 14 August 1942 at Richmond, Virginia. And I really like this character. He's like you said, he's not really in the forefront. He is in all 10 episodes, and he is highlighted throughout the book. But he's sort of like he's the gray man. You know, he's the guy that doesn't cause problems. He's not, tripping over himself, being overly ambitious. He's skilled. He's proficient. He's quiet. He doesn't complain. I mean, he's honestly, he's the kind of soldier I think anybody would want to have.
Just so we're in concert with the rest of the episodes, he was played in the show by actor Peter Youngblood Hills. Does a very good job. I mean, one thing I want to put out about the show itself is that I don't really find anyone that was on the show as an actor who did a poor job, in my opinion. I really think there's a lot of guys in this show who should have been bigger after this show, for whatever reason. Now, having said that, this show is it's like the high school of what we would consider major league ball players. It's like the high school where all your major league ball players of nowadays came from. I mean, you got so many guys. Michael Fassbender.
Mm-hmm.
Last week we talked about the very first episode that Janovic was in, who's played by
Hardy.
Tom Hardy's.
Little side note.
Yeah, go ahead.
Cut this if you need to, but little unknown, well, not unknown, but little known fact about him. Not only was he in this playing a soldier, but he was also in Black Hawk Down.
That's right. Yes.
Yep, he played a guy that I know that I worked with a while ago named Twombly in Black Hawk Down.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. There was he started off doing all these military movies. Now I think that's kind of stayed with him through even most of his. I mean, he was just in Dunkirk this past year. Played big name in a movie where he only was on the screen for like 4 minutes of the whole movie, but he's like the big draw. And but guys like him, these guys. This is where their names started to first get thrown around Hollywood. So I want to let those guys know as they're listening to this, if they are listening to this, that you guys really did an honor to the characters and to the guys who were in this show. And as veterans, we really do appreciate you guys doing it right. I mean, honest to God. And I don't think there's very many people out there that would disagree with me that you guys really did a fantastic job of putting this show together.
Oh, they did a phenomenal job. And, like you said at the beginning, throughout the first, few episodes, they didn't name who the veterans were that were speaking before the episodes. But the actors did such a phenomenal job, both in likeness and in portrayal, that
you kind of started figuring it out, didn't you?
Well, I had to do it. I was like, okay, who are these guys and how do they match up? And, I think I was, I'm sure I'm remembering incorrectly, but probably, 98 to 100% right. Of course it was.
One I always laugh about to go down that rabbit hole is even to this day, if I ever have a couple, and obviously in the last 4 months, guys, just so you understand, the last 4 months, I've watched this show 10 times all the way through in the last 4 months as I've been doing this series. If I get a 4 or 5 months off, let's say, and I go back to watch the show, and I will do this every single time, I will completely confuse Winters and First Sergeant Lipton's characters every single time. I will think that Lipton is Winters and Winters is Lipton, and then I watch this episode, and then I'll be reminded that they're always the other way around. Those are the only two that I can never figure out. But yeah, most of the rest of them, I'm pretty sure I was the same way. There's that, like, Malarkey is one that you can always know that it's Malarkey by the way he talks, and believe it or not, Shifty Powers is another one, and that's why with this episode he's in here. So let's get into the episode itself and talk about what actually went down.
Mm-hmm.
As the episode opens, it shows the war calming down and starts with Winters swimming in a river, relaxing. Then shifts to the men arriving in Austria and taking the Eagle's Nest. And before we go into that, it shows him relaxing, but it shows him and Nixon having like an interaction on the side of the river where they're talking about what they're going to do after the war, and they're looking through photos that Winters has gotten his hands on. But then they're like, how did we get to here? There's like that moment, and then it kind of drifts into a flashback. And it shows the men arriving in Austria to take down what's called the Eagle's Nest in Berchtesgaden, where all they can find are dead German officers and a considerable amount of war loot. Winters, after announcing the war's conclusion in Europe, shows Nixon Hermann Goering's massive private wine cellar and orders the vintage distributed to the soldiers by truckloads. But he gives Nixon his first pick, which I always thought was funny with all Nixon's drinking issues, that he takes Nixon down there, tells him he has him a gift, and takes him out there to turn that stuff over to him. The men then relax in the nest until they have to move on. And while the anticipated SS guerrilla units never arrive, I mean, because they were told they're going to come and they're going to defend this. This is I guess you would say their Valhalla or their Mecca, for the Nazi party. So they assumed there was going to be a giant insurgency that burst out. That never came. The men at Easy Company, they still suffer from fatigue, shaky nerves, boredom, and these kind of things. When things start to die down, they can produce very dangerous results. Here's one thing that is another one of the history corrections. They show this whole scene where they're on the side of the mountain trying to get up into Berchen's garden and up to the Eagle's Nest, and they talk about in the show they lead you to believe that they are the first to be there. That is not correct. They were actually the third unit to arrive there. They were all American units that had arrived there before then, but they were the first unit to actually hold it and control it for a considerable amount of time. The other units had just come through and seized it on the way to somewhere else. But the Eagle's Nest, which you've heard me mention, the Eagle's Nest, it's kind of important to talk about what the Eagle's Nest was for those of you who don't know. The Eagle's Nest was Hitler's retreat above Berchtesgaden, where Easy Company is assigned. It was little used by the Fuhrer as he was terrified of heights and disliked the cold and the thin mountain air. And today, right now, it doubles as a seasonal restaurant and is one of the few undamaged monuments from the Nazi period. Now, so it was a birthday present from the Nazi party to Adolf Hitler, and it's beautiful. I've been up there myself, and
Have you?
Yeah, I've been up there once, and it's gorgeous, man. It really is, and it really is a testament to what can happen if you've got all the money in the world and have people that you idolize and build stuff to. Having said that, it's kind of hard to really take in all the beauty when you realize all the horror that it was built around. But the fact that it's used now as a retreat and as a restaurant, a lot of people go up there and can actually see the Alps and how beautiful things are up there. And the fact that it was rarely ever used by Hitler, even though it was his mountain retreat home. It was one of the places they thought when they were not 100% sure where all the Nazi leaders were. Now, having said that, Hermann Goering, obviously, he ran from the Nazis and flew into Great Britain trying to surrender long before the war ended. As we know, the Russians, and I say this is conspiracy theorist as it sounds, we know the Russians claim that Hitler killed himself, committed suicide inside of the bunker. As for this show, we're going to assume that that's the case, although there are many pieces of evidence that could say that he did not die there and went on.
That's a show for another day.
That is a show for another day, and it's not a show that would be, in my opinion, a conspiracy theory. There's a lot of really good evidence to indicate that he may not have died there. But for the sake of the show, Hitler is dead. They knew that, but what they were expecting was all these SS hardliners to be, holed up there and locked in.
Well, sure, yeah. I mean, it's the line from the show that it's the one town that you can't deny.
Right. It's they had the episode before, it was the birthplace of National Socialism. So the Nazi Party was born in the town from last week's episode, but this is the place that they held as their capital, if nothing else. Not the capital of Germany, but the capital of Nazi socialism, fascist socialism. So it's odd, man, because the show is full of a lot of, especially when they're at Berchtesgaden, it's full of a lot of, the place is beautiful. They walk into that restaurant, I think, in the very beginning, and the one waiter goes to run off, and he turns around, he comes back, he goes to grab the guest list thing, and Nixon's like, no. And he goes over and he looks through it, and there's all these names. And if you look on that as you're watching the show, there's some really historic names you can see in there. Not so much Nazis, but famous world leaders who, unfortunately, I think if you look closely, I think Perón's name from Argentina.
Argentina.
Yeah, I think the leader of Argentina, Perón, was there, and he was well known to be a Nazi sympathizer and collaborator. So. What are some of the things from the scenes where, not when they're in the Austrian town, but from the Berchtesgaden seizure stuff? What are some of the things from those scenes that stick out to you?
Yeah, you used my name right there.
I did. Boom. All right, let's do it. So, what are some of the Thank God you're paying attention. And you know the thing is, I'm gonna block your name out. I'm gonna cut your name out, but I'm gonna leave all this in just so people can see how hard it is to not say it. So Zaphod, Zaphod, Mr. Beetlebrock,
Yes, sir.
president of the universe, of the galaxy. Excuse me. What are some of the things at the Birch's Garden scenes that stick out to you?
Well, one thing that I hope is entirely historically accurate is Spears in his cuffs, because you see a side of him that, with all of the sort of folklore surrounding him, you get to see a little bit of him, off duty, as it were, which I really enjoyed. But when he goes to O'Keefe, when they're walking in, and he says, are you anxious to get off duty? And he's like, oh no, there's just so much to do. That was sort of like you said before. Once you switch gears, right? Once you come out of combat operations, or you redeploy, it's almost trepidation for me, because I can see if they don't hold this thing together, right, bad things are going to happen. Because,
yeah, we all know it, don't we? I mean, we've all seen it. We've all seen the danger of taking guys who've been actively in combat and then giving them downtime. I mean, they don't do well with it.
It's a fine line. If you don't sort of keep them motivated and keep them, they've come off of 3 years of looking for work. It's always looking for work. Well, now you don't have any.
Right.
And that 180-degree shift, this is sort of where I see it, and I'm sure I didn't originally see it the first time I saw it, but having, I watch this series at least twice a year.
Yes, true.
I travel a lot, and it's just one of those things that I make an effort to watch it once a year. It usually turns into at least twice a year, but it's something that I do annually, and I make it a point to do so, just to kind of remind me of where we come from and what was done to get us to where we are.
Right. So let's go into the next part of the show then, and
yeah. So in the next part of the show here,
this is after they move on. Let's make sure everyone understands that they move on they get pushed over to another part of Austria to seize a portion of Austria and hold it, and now it's kind of like follow-on contingency, peacetime, toning down operations out of a different town. So they're no longer in Birch Garden from this point on, but I think there's a time lapse. I think there's a couple months they probably don't show, and they kind of jump forward a couple months. So then we get to the point where Zaphod's going to pick up.
Yeah. So the next the next scenes that they show here has got Liebgott, Sisk, and Webster, and they're in a Jeep, and they're headed out on a mission, for lack of a better word, and it's. So, Liebgott is all geared up, and he wants to go and avenge some of these atrocities that he witnessed, in the concentration camps. And supposedly there's a German officer, commandant of one of these camps that's been living in the area. So they drive up to his little farmstead that he's got in the mountains and bust in on him in the house. And Liebgott, being an interpreter also, is yelling at him in English and in German, and interrogates him a little bit, and confirms that he is indeed the commandant that they're looking for. So he pulls his pistol out, and it gets really uncomfortable for Webster. Webster leaves, and a shot rings out. The guy runs out. He's not killed.
Yeah, it looked like it winged him on his ears shot off or something.
Yeah, and that obviously struck me as odd, because that seems artistic license to me. But that's neither here nor there. So the supposed commandant runs out and starts trying to run away, and Liebgott is yelling at Webster, "Hey, you need to shoot this guy. He is the bad guy. You need to shoot him." And Webster's not having anything to do with it. They have a nice little back and forth, and then you hear the second shot ring out, and Sisk has taken it upon himself at this point to shoot the man in the back with his rifle.
Right, and so you guys, so that people who are listening are aware of this, I think that this is the one portion of the show that I'm not really happy with the way they went with the artistic license. Not to say that he didn't get shot and run off. He did. But Webster was not there at all. I think that they used Webster because he was a character they knew would kind of react in the way that he did react in that scene. But the story goes like
it fits his character and his previous
right. The story goes like
attitude.
this. Yeah, Commander Ronald Spears signed Liebgott along with John C. Lynch, Don Moore, and Wayne Sisk. John Lynch and Don Moore are two extra guys that are there. They are the real guys who were there in Webster's place to eliminate the Nazi who had been the head of the labor camp. When they find the man at his farmhouse, Liebgott violently interrogates him, confirms the man was guilty. Liebgott shoots him once in the chest, wounded. The Nazi runs up to a hill. Lynch orders Moore to shoot him, Moon orders Moon to shoot him. Moon refuses, and Sisk does finally shoot him afterwards. Webster was not part of the incident at all. There is something that is kind of sticks out to me at the end of the scene is while they're driving back, Liebgott says the man was a coward for running. Webster says, hell man, the war is over. Everyone would run. So
I struggle with that because I wholeheartedly agree with that.
You agree with that? Anyone would run?
I would agree that man in that position, whether it was him or not, it's of course he's going to deny it.
Yes, right. Yeah,
of course he's going to deny it.
He's either going to deny it because he's innocent, or he's going to deny it because he's guilty or shit. And those guys that were running those camps, they knew they knew they were wrong.
There's no way they didn't.
Well, let me ask you a question. What do you think about this? Is not a secret. This is not artistic license with this incident. This is a real incident that happened. We're not reading about Ronald Spears being a war criminal.
Yes, I'm saying the way that it was portrayed in the scene, I believe, is artistic license.
Right. What I'm trying to get to is how come we watch this scene, and not that how come like I want us to do something about it. I'm trying to get to a point here. How come we watch this scene and this incident happened, and there is no legal investigation that's done about this? This is something that was just accepted as happening. Whereas if we did this nowadays, there would be hell to pay for you and I if we were sent off by any commander to go assassinate. If for all intents and purposes, assassinate.
No, that would have been a HVT mission, and we would have zipped them and brought them back.
Right. So, do you think? I just wonder what your opinion, your thoughts are on the difference in the culture. How that this is just something that us as Americans, and maybe not fine with. I'm sure there's people who have reservations out there about this scene and about what happened, but this happened. This was real. Spears did order them to go do it. And Webster does make a point in the scene of being like, does Winters know about this? And it doesn't matter. And Webster's like, you're goddamn wrong. It does matter. And he's right. And I don't judge these guys for it. And I think a lot of being a part of this mission leads to Liebgott's absence from the brotherhood of seeing each other every few years for so long, because he really was a guy that kind of dropped off the face of the earth after the war and didn't come back for a long time. I wonder if that has anything to do with the fact that he feels like maybe he did something here that was maybe not on the up and up. What do you think?
I don't know, man. I've thought about this scene a lot, and I honestly don't know that I could ever put myself in these guys' shoes.
I agree.
Because walking through the woods and finding what they found after the 3 years of having gone through what they've gone through, I've never personally experienced anything on that level. I mean, we've been through a lot of shit, but I've never experienced anything like that.
Right.
I don't know that I can say, whether it's the guys in the Jeep going to actually do it or the guy, the officers that ordered them to do it. I can't say whether it's right or wrong, or whether it was a poor decision. I mean, they very well may have been in the mindset after having seen all that. We're not going to have the headache of a trial. We're not going to catch these guys. If we do know 100%, to them 100% that guy was involved, we're just going to put them down. Look what they did.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't have the Mossad back then. We didn't have the Operation Retribution or Operation Righteous Retribution, which was the Mossad mission to chase down and blood debt. They called them blood debt. All the Nazi criminals. We as a world are fine with it. I think it says something about our understanding of atrocities as a human race. There is no one out there, barring scumbag neo-Nazis and white supremacists, who have any problem with any of this stuff going on. I'm telling you what, man, I really do believe this. I believe that, like what you said, I don't want to put myself in the shoes of those guys to judge them, but I don't think even if I did, I would find fault because I think that this was well earned.
And I don't know that if I did put myself in those shoes that I could take Webster's position.
Yeah, I don't think I could either. I think I would. I think I'm old enough now to admit that I would be just as angry and just as cold hearted in taking putting down these animals as Liebgott and Sisk were.
Yeah, it's a tough scene.
It is a tough scene, and it's tough to admit that that I know deep down that I would be that cold hearted. But I mean, you know me. We know, there's certain things about us that are just different when we're working than it is when we're not, and
Yeah.
That's one of the things about being a soldier. That scene comes and goes. I think that's a very important scene to show that there were things going on, no matter how much the leadership had the respect of the guys. The fact that Spears sent these guys out and didn't have any of the command know about it, I'm not going to lie to you, that says a lot about the plausible deniability that the men put upon the leadership. They didn't keep them informed of stuff like this because they knew it would reflect poorly on the leadership. And so, anyway, moving on, with the war in Europe over, because it was completely VE Day, as they said, the men prepare to go to war in the Pacific, because the Pacific is still raging. And, they had just invaded Okinawa right about the time that VE Day, which was some of the bloodiest fighting in the Pacific War. Winters tries to be allowed to transfer to go early to the Pacific because he just wants to get it over with. Now, I don't buy his I just want to get it over with thing. I think that at this point, Winters has full on become addicted to war. He was so focused on being a good soldier, and it really did bother him, I think, that that the company that he was in charge of was taken away from him so quickly, and because he was a good leader and they had to move him up, not because he did anything wrong. But they do that in the whole scene. They talk about it. He goes, my last shots were at the Battle of Crossroads. And he's like, you went through Bastogne and everything else without firing your weapon. And Winters was like, never fired my weapon. And I was on the front lines. That says a lot about Winters' leadership and the men under him. He gets denied. The general that he's talking to from the airborne unit that is immediately leaving to go to the Pacific, or thinks they're immediately leaving to go to the Pacific, tells him no. Your men have earned the right to have you around. So he starts getting the men prepped. He tells them to start having the NCOs and the junior officers prepping the men to go to war in the Pacific. And there's that funny scene when Nixon's like, these guys are going to love you, but it has a lot to do with what you and I spoke about earlier, where you've got to have some work to do. You've got to keep them, gainfully employed. Otherwise, they're going to start falling apart.
I think that may be another reason why he requested the transfer.
You think he didn't want to see the aftermath of all that stuff?
Not only that, but I think he just wanted to work.
Felt antsy in the pantsy, huh?
Yeah, and I think, like you said, having been moved up and been at that level, I think he just wanted to work, But another thing that I thought about is that this is a hard episode for me to watch. It's funny, when you first started talking about doing this and we discussed possibly coming on and being on with you for one of the episodes, of course it would be this one. This is a difficult one for me to watch because everybody leaves.
Yeah. Well,
it's over. It's
bro,
over.
That's why
it splits up. Guys move on. It's really hard to deal with.
That's why it's you that's on this with me. So here's the big thing with me bringing Zaphod on. Me and Zaphod have known each other since the very first time we stepped into combat. But we did not know each other. We did not know each other at all before that moment. And yet, to this day, I consider him one of my best friends in the entire world.
Absolutely.
And there is a bond, and there'll be years where we go without not speaking to each other for any reason other than just situational, got stuff going on. But we get back on the phone with each other, and we're immediately right back to being like we were back in the day. And there's very few people in the world that you would have that kind of relationship with. Coming back to the title of the show, Band of Brothers, there's very few people that you would have a relationship with who you just consider just as much a brother as somebody who grew up your blood brother. I mean, for God's sakes, we've been in each other's lives for so long that there's been weddings and all. There's stuff that we've been a part of, and it's hard when you walk away from guys that, and not walk away because you're done with them, but you walk away because it's time to move on, and it's a struggle and it sucks. And this episode is very hard to watch because you don't want to see, as much as you don't want to see any more guys die, it really hurts when you're guys like us to see this episode, because we've been through that moment where everyone walks away.
And they did such a good job with it.
They did. They did such a good job.
It's almost like you sit down, you watch all of the episodes, and at the end, you're like, well, shit, man, I'm not gonna get to talk to Malarkey tomorrow.
Right.
I don't know that dude.
Yeah, but you're emotionally attached to him. You're emotionally
so
invested in that guy's life.
They did a very good job. But I think that's another reason why he wanted the transfer, was because he knew guys were getting points.
Right.
Guys were getting moved around. When you like we talked about, when you promote up officers and you promote up non-coms, guys get moved around. They get shuffled out into other companies, into other battalions. I think maybe he was just struggling with that and was like, look, I've been here since day one with these guys. Yeah, they may go at some point to the Pacific, but it's not going to be anytime soon.
Right.
Just get me out of here. Let me go.
Yep.
Let me go make this transition and go find new guys and go to work.
No, I can see that. I think that's a good point. So you bring up the points thing, and that's where the title comes from. And before we go on, just so everyone can understand what points means, you had to have 85 points to be able to be sent home. So a lot of these guys, they only joined up for the war. These weren't guys who joined up to be career soldiers. They joined up to go fight in the war. And so if you had 85 points, which points were earned a whole bunch of different ways. You earned points for time in service. You earned points in time in combat. You earned extra points for being wounded. You earned extra points for being awarded certain awards. Points for being promoted. Now, this is easy company. None of these guys had the points to go home. And some of them were really, really low on the point scale. And so that's what the name points comes from. And all these guys are trying to build the points up that they can get to send guys home. Some of the things that happen, since the men are stuck in Germany or Austria, they soon let the drinking get the best of them. And a replacement in India Company becomes so drunk, he uses his sidearm to kill a British and German officer, and then wounds Staff Sergeant Charles E. Grant by shooting him in the head. Grant was then taken to a German doctor to have brain surgery while the replacement is hunted down. When he's found, the Easy Company men beat him until Spears arrives, and Spears almost kills the soldier, but then turns him over to the MPs. I think what really enraged these guys about it was the fact that he was a replacement.
I think so too.
I think that if had it been one of their guys if it had been Malarkey, who had seen so much stuff, had seen so many of his brothers, die and get injured, they would have understood why he was losing it. But the fact that he was a friggin' replacement, it's like, what are you pissed off about? What are you having so much struggles with?
It had to be so hard being a replacement.
Yeah, well, we talk about that in the one thing, but you just don't fit in, right? So, and he's a replacement. He's a replacement that got there right after the war ended.
Right. Some of the guys, that were there for Bastogne and Market Garden and showed up, right after D-Day. They earned the respect and they worked their way up, as you see in some of the other episodes. But yeah, the fact that this guy was a total new guy.
Yeah, he also didn't see. I think that guy was probably a sociopath because he didn't seem to give a shit. And even when they were beating him, and they beat him bad, you saw the first sergeant's out there, and Lutz is telling him to chill out. He's like, just play cards, forget about what's going on in there. And they were beating that guy bad. I think he got what was coming to him. I think had he not shot Grant, it wouldn't have been a problem. I mean, not a problem. He would have been going to the MPs and going to jail for killing the British and the German officer.
Yes.
He wouldn't have been beaten by Easy Company like that. Shooting Grant was a bad call. Janovic dies. So that's another thing they got going on. So Janovic, who's played by Tom Hardy, who you just see for the first time in the last episode, so he was a replacement also along with O'Keefe, but he had been there for some of the stuff that they had done. So he had kind of built a reputation. Guys liked him. Webster shows up, lets him off duty. Janovic gets into a Jeep, goes driving off, and an accident occurs. And Janovic gets into a Jeep accident, and the Jeep accident kills him. Before we go on to the German soldier stuff, Zaphod, which you're going to talk about, let's talk about why we have Shifty Powers as our highlight character. So Shifty Powers was never injured. He had never been off of the front lines from D-Day all the way to the moment they're at right now.
I don't feel that they they kind of glance over the fact that he was never wounded, or at least I feel that they do.
Yeah,
Maybe
it's
I'm
one
wrong.
line. He goes, "Yeah, never wounded, never came off the line," and then they just move on because they ask him, "How come you don't have any points?"
Right. Well, I'm going to read you this excerpt that I found real quick.
Okay.
This is from there was an autobiography that was written posthumously by a guy that's done a bunch of 101st writing. It's called Shifty's War. The authorized biography of Sergeant Daryl Shifty Powers, the legendary sharpshooter from the Band of Brothers, and it's written by Marcus Brotherton. It says Shifty Powers fit well into this group of elite soldiers. His paratrooper unit didn't have snipers by name, but if a man was particularly handy with a rifle, he could qualify as an expert marksman. Shifty Powers was one of only 2 men in the company of 140 soldiers who initially achieved this designation. When it came to shooting rifles and hitting what needed to be hit, he was the best of the best. Fellow soldier Earl One Lung McClung described Shifty this way. He was an excellent shot, as well as an excellent friend. On patrols, he knew exactly what he was doing. That's why he was one of the very few old-timers in the company who was never wounded. He had the best ears of any man in the company. He could hear anything, including enemy sentries, better than most men, so he would often lead our patrols. Shifty Powers was a great man, one of the kindest people I've ever known, and I've never heard him say anything negative about anyone.
Yeah, it's God. Thanks. That's awesome. I'm glad you read that. True, I did it again.
Yep.
Thanks, thank you, Zaphod. So anyway, I think that personality comes out in this episode. They show them out there. They're telling them to go train, and then they cut to them in the woods walking, and you think they're out doing movement to contact drills, but they're not. They're out hunting a deer. They see the deer. Shifty's out in front, holds his rifle up.
Because there's no KP at that point.
Yeah, there's no KP. They're eating T-rats. They're done with eating T-rats. They want to eat a good meal. Shifty can't drop the hammer on the deer. He's just sitting there like he's enjoying being out in the woods with his friends.
Yeah.
And he kind of gives him that impression. He goes, "Look, man, I'm just glad to be out here with you guys where we're not getting shot at."
You know what else I took from that scene? And again, maybe this is just me. What I took from that scene, because they're like, "Oh, Shifty, you let it get away." I almost think he did it on purpose.
No, he did. I think he did. He absolutely did let that thing go on purpose.
Because now he's back in that element where I don't have to shoot it.
Right.
For 3.5 years, 3 years, and some months, if something pops up, you got to put it down. And now you're in this totally different element. You know what? Let that one go.
Yeah, and like I said, the longer he's out there hunting, the longer he's hanging out with his friends in the woods. And once he puts that deer down, he's taken a life that he may or may not need to take, which I think at that point guys had learned the value. I think most people, soldiers who have taken lives, know the value of life better than anyone else. I think he's like, I just want to hang out with my friends. So he doesn't have enough points to go home. He doesn't complain. Like you said, he never says a bad thing. He doesn't complain about anyone. The command sees that they've got a lot of guys who don't have anywhere near the amount of points to go home. So they're going to have a raffle. In Easy Company, there was one name in the raffle bucket. You see them walk up with the helmet, and the helmet's turned upside down, and there's one sheet of paper in there, and all the officers are smiling because they know it. And who's the name they draw? Daryl C. Powers.
Shifty.
So Shifty gets told he's going home, and Shifty comes walking up to Winters when he's getting ready to leave.
Come in.
Don't mean to interrupt you, sir. I just wanted to, say goodbye. You know, you was, well, it's been a long time.
You got everything you need?
Yes, sir. I gathered up my loot. Pistols, mainly. Paperwork's all done. I even got my back pay in my pocket. Back home in Virginia. Well, I just don't rightly know how I'm going to explain all this. You see, I seen.
You're a hell of a fine soldier, Shifty. There's nothing more to explain.
Thank you, sir.
that to me is the hardest part of the show to watch for me.
Mm-hmm.
How do I go home and I don't know what to say about all this? And I think that guys who've been to combat, I think they understand that statement more than any other thing that's said in the entire show. I mean, it chokes me up watching it because that actor sells that friggin' line. He's like, I don't know what to tell people at home about all this. What do I say about all this? All that Winters, and this is all about Winters' leadership. He's like, you're a good soldier, Shifty. And Shifty turns around, walks off. And they tried to do the right thing and get him sent home early. But unfortunately, Shifty Powers gets into a car accident on the way to the boat and breaks his hips and ends up spending months and months and almost a year in the hospital. And the saddest part of it all is everyone made it home before Shifty.
Yeah.
Because Shifty ended up being in the hospital so long when he was being sent home by them because he was the one guy that had the least amount of points.
Right.
So
it's incredible, and it speaks to his character not only as a soldier but as a person because I read somewhere else also that the fact that he didn't have enough points, that was just mentioned in passing conversation with one or two guys.
Right.
It could have died right there, but instead it turned into the company doing this for him.
Yeah. And because of who he was, not because he was the one guy. Had it been any other person, they may not have gone through the efforts, but Shifty Powers was so well liked.
Webster was close on points. I'm sure there was, a handful of dudes that were close.
Those are guys that deserved it just as much. But even they knew that the right thing to do was to send Shifty home because he never came off the line the whole time they were there. Every single one of those guys had gotten injured at some point and it came off for a break. If however short along the break was or however meaningful it was, there was a break. Shifty never got a break. Shifty saw every gruesome moment of the entire 2 years they were there.
Well, and it's really good that he did too, though, because there's a couple different times, that his actions definitely saved the lives of lots of guys. Finding the pieces of terrain that didn't look right, that ended up being artillery batteries and putting down opposing sharpshooters. I don't think you'll find a guy that was upset that Shifty was there.
No, not at all. Yeah, that's a good point. Talk to us about the local regiment of German soldiers and what goes on with them. This is towards the ending of the episode.
Yeah, so getting towards the end, the local regiment of German soldiers. Now, these guys had been basically coming out of the hills into the mountains in little groups, surrendering right and left. They're at this point they've got no food, no water. So they've been given up, and there's quite a number of them, and they come to this field for their formal surrender with this German officer. Captain Sobel at this point walks past now Major Winters, and instead of properly rendering his salute, he kind of just glances off the other way. Ridiculous attempt, like he didn't see the man.
Right.
And Winters says, rightly so. Instructs him that we salute the rank, not the man. And Sobel finally salutes and leaves with Nixon and Liebgott standing in the back with little smiles on their face. And I think this is definitely a point that all soldiers can agree with. We've all had those guys that, right, wrong, or indifferent, we feel have reached positions that they don't necessarily deserve to be in. Not saying that Dick Winters didn't, deserve to be where he was, but I'm sure that
was the opinion of Sobel at that time.
Sobel's
probably.
Opinion,
right?
At that time, I put this guy through training. He's sitting in a Jeep with some clusters, and I've still got capstan bars. That's right. I'm sure a tough pill for him to swallow. That's the way it works. It's the rank, not the man. You ain't got to like him,
but you are going to respect him.
And
so the German officer that wants to talk to his men is a German general named Wolf Kahler. He approaches Lipton to ask if he could speak to his men, but there was a scene earlier on where Kahler was talking to Winters in a meeting, and they were going over the terms of surrender, and he attempts to hand him his sidearm, and Winters tells him he can keep his sidearm. This is another artistic license. That did not happen. Winters did not allow him to keep his sidearm. Winters actually kept the weapon, as was the rules at the time. And Winters said that the weapon was always in his possession for the rest of his life. And he dropped the magazine out of it, and the weapon was never fired again, never armed again. There was never another round put in the chamber for the rest of his life. So it's a very famous scene that we're actually going to hear right now. We're going to hear the speech that Kohler gives to his men as Liebgott interprets it.
Männer, es war ein langer Krieg. Es war ein harter Krieg.
Liebgott? Man, it's been a long war, it's been a tough war.
Ihr habt tapfer und stolz für euer Vaterland gekämpft.
You fought bravely, proudly for your country.
Ihr seid eine ganz besondere Truppe,
You are a special group.
die ineinander einen Zusammenhalt gefunden hat,
You found in one another a bond.
wie sich nur im Kampf entwickeln kann.
It exists only in combat.
Unter Kameraden,
Among brothers,
die Fuchshöhlen geteilt haben,
who've shared foxholes.
die sich in schrecklichen Momenten gegenseitig gestützt haben,
Held each other in dire moments.
die den Tod zusammen gesehen haben und gemeinsam gelitten haben.
Who've seen death and suffered together.
Ich bin stolz, mit euch gedient zu haben.
I'm proud to have served with each and every one of you.
Sie alle verdienen ein langes und glückliches Leben in Frieden.
You deserve long and happy lives in peace.
The men find out that the war is completely over, and they celebrate with a game of baseball. And what was great about this actually happened. They actually had this moment where everyone came back, and
Buck Compton
comes back,
yeah.
and guys are there, and they're playing baseball. And there's this is the scene that Zaphod was talking about. That's really hard to watch because you know it's all coming to an end.
Buck Compton came back to see the company to let us know that he was all right. He became a prosecutor in Los Angeles. He convicted Sirhan Sirhan in the murder of Robert Kennedy and was later appointed to the California Court of Appeals. David Webster became a writer for the Saturday Evening Post and Wall Street Journal, and later wrote a book about sharks. In 1961, he went out on the ocean alone and was never seen again. Johnny Martin would return to his job at the railroad and then start his own construction company. He splits his time between Arizona and a place in Montana. George Luz became a handyman in Providence, Rhode Island. And as a testament to his character, 1,600 people attended his funeral in 1998. Doc Rowe died in Louisiana in 1998. He'd been a construction contractor. Frank Briccani returned to Chicago and worked a postal route as a mailman. Joe Liebgott returned to San Francisco and drove his cab. Bull Ranneman was one of the best soldiers I ever had. He went into the earth-moving business in Arkansas. He's still there. Alton Moore returned to Wyoming with a unique souvenir: Hitler's personal photo albums. He was killed in a car accident in 1958. Floyd Talbert, we all lost touch with in civilian life until he showed up at a reunion just before his death in 1981. How we lived our lives after the war was as varied as each man. Carwood Lipton became a glass-making executive in charge of factories all over the world. He has a nice life in North Carolina. Harry Welsh, He married Kitty Grogan, became an administrator for the Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania school system. Ronald Spears stayed in the Army, served in Korea, in 1958 returned to Germany as governor of Spandau Prison. He retired a lieutenant colonel. Get him round.
All right, Webster.
Easy company! School circle! For Easy Company, it was D-Day plus 434.
Fast man would have had it, Perko. Listen up. Got some news. This morning, President Truman received the unconditional surrender from the Japanese. War's over.
Regardless of points, medals, or wounds, each man in the 101st Airborne would be going home. Each of us would be forever connected by our shared experience. And each would have to rejoin the world as best he could. Lewis Nixon had some tough times after the war. He was divorced a couple of times. Then in 1956, he married a woman named Grace, and everything came together for him. He spent the rest of his life with her, traveling the world. My friend Lou died in 1995. I took up his job offer and was a personnel manager at the Nixon Nitration Works until I was called back into service in 1950 to train officers and rangers. But I chose not to go to Korea. I'd had enough of war. I stayed around Hershey, Pennsylvania, finally finding a little farm. A little peaceful corner of the world, where I still live today. There is not a day that goes by that I do not think of the men I served with, who never got to enjoy the world without war.
This series concludes by showing footage of the real-life members of Easy Company who provided the interviews that opened many of the episodes, but for the first time with their names listed, including major winners. And obviously, guys, this is an audio podcast, not a video podcast, so you won't be able to see them individually, but I do recommend going on to YouTube if you haven't seen it in a while and replaying some of those veteran interviews from the men of Easy Company with the names underneath, so that you can see some of the, especially if you've just been listening to the podcast, listening to those voices that I've had at the beginning of every episode and which you're going to hear at the end of this episode. I want to thank Zaphod for coming on. Brother, like I said, I wanted to save the whole reason why you were coming on this show to the end, but honest to God, man, you're a brother to me. Like if you had the same DNA, and that has a lot to do with what this show is about, and the fact that you and I served together, and as guys who have listened to No Shit There I Was Volume 2, me and Zaphod have some interesting stories of our time together, and there's all those guys that we talk about in that episode and stuff like that. They fall into this same category where
Absolutely.
There's bonds that you make with people that are just never broken when it comes to stuff like this.
It's necessary for guys like us, man. Like we've got to maintain relationships with our brothers like that. You know, there's another thing that I read when I was, doing show prep for this episode. Even Shifty, as great of a guy he was, as great of a person, as great of a soldier, he struggled.
Mm-hmm.
He struggled for a while. What his family says really turned him around. Well, not turned him around makes it sound too negative, but what helped him was when they started doing research for the book and for the, eventual show and all of that, and reuniting with the guys, it recharges your battery. A couple weeks ago, I was in Europe and my phone rang. I looked down, and the name that was on the phone, I haven't talked to that dude in 4 years. I picked up the phone, just like you said. We started into a conversation like we'd been talking every day.
Right.
And he said, "Hey, man, I'm having a birthday." I said, "Good for you. Most of us have those every year. But if you're having one, congratulations." He said, "Listen, dickhead, I'm having the birthday. You need to come down for it. We live, 3 hours away from each other, and I haven't seen him in 4 years." And I went, and there were a bunch of dudes from the team that we were on together that were there. And dude, that recharged my battery for a month. I felt amazing.
Yep.
For a month after hanging out with them dudes. For 2 hours. I was only there for 2 hours.
Right. It does. It means a lot to guys, especially guys like us. So you guys have listened to us go through these last 11 episodes, and we talked a lot about guys who had passed, and I didn't want to give... I tried my best not to give any spoilers, but here is a list of the guys, the main character and surviving members of Easy Company, and when they did finally pass. Captain Herbert M. Sobel finally passed 30 September 1987. Major Richard Dick Winters on 2 January 2011. First Lieutenant Frederick Theodore Moose Heilinger, 3 November 2001. Captain Ronald Spears, 11 April 2007. Captain Lewis Nixon, 11 January 1995. First Lieutenant Lynn Compton, 25 February 2012. Second Lieutenant Carwood Lipton, 16 December 2001. Tech Sergeant Donald Malarkey, 30 September 2017. Staff Sergeant William Wild Bill Garnier, 8 March 2014. Staff Sergeant Darrell C. Powers, 17 June 2009. Sergeant Clancy Lyall, 19 March 2012. Sergeant Robert Popeye Wynn, 18 March 2000. Corporal Walter Gordon, 19 April 1997. Corporal Forrest Guth, 8 August 2009. Private First Class Ed Babe Heffron, 1 December 2013. Private First Class Edward Tipper, 1 February 2017. Private First Class David Kenyon Webster, 9 September 1961. And Private Albert Blythe, 17 December 1967. Guys, these men should be remembered for all the things they did well beyond just... these guys came back from war and were family men. They were fathers, they were brothers, they were sons, they were husbands. But, hey, brother, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I'm glad I could do it.
Oh yeah, well, like I said, if there was going to be one episode that one of my former guys I served with was on, it was going to be this one, because this is the one that really does bring it all together. This isn't going to be the very last episode. Next week, guys, you are going to get a bonus episode, which is going to be the full, unabridged, and unedited interview that I had with Captain Dale Dye.
I still can't believe you got to talk to that man.
Not
at length and detail. It's
there is about a half hour of footage of me talking with him that did not make any of the episodes or the teaser episode on Changing Hearts and Minds that are still out there. So don't go running off. Make sure you come in next week and catch that episode and listen to all the background stuff and some of his opinions on Hollywood and war movies and stuff like that. Don't go away, because here is the voices of Malarkey, Winters, Lipton, and Shifty Powers, and Babe Heffron. These are the voices of the guys you were going to hear as we exit out of the episode that normally you hear at the beginning of the episode. But just like this episode that saved it to the end, I saved the veterans' voices to the end. So thank you guys for coming along on this journey with me. It's been a long 4 months. I've probably know more about Band of Brothers than Stephen Ambrose does at this point, since I've read his book 3 times and watched the show front to back 4 times or 10 times in the last 4 months. So thanks for coming along.
It's a very unusual feeling. It's a very unusual happening, and it's a very unusual bonding.
We knew that we could depend on each other, and so we were a close-knit group.
Just brave, so brave it was unbelievable. And I don't know anybody that I admire more than Bill Garnier and Joe Toy, and they were very, very special.
I'm just one part of the big war, that's all. One little part. And I'm proud to be a part of it. Sometimes it makes me cry.
The real men, the real heroes, are the fellas that are still buried over there and those that come home to be buried.
Seemed like you thought that you could do just about anything. And after the war was over and you came back out, why, you lost a lot of that. Or at least I did. I lost all that confidence.
Well, he's hoping to stay alive, that's all. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Henry V was talking to his men. He said, from this day to the ending of the world, we in it shall be remembered. We lucky few, we band of brothers. For he who today sheds his blood with me shall be my brother.
Do you remember the letter that Mike Ranney wrote me? You do. Do you remember how I ended it? I cherish the memories of a question my grandson asked me the other day when he said, "Grandpa, were you a hero in the war?" Grandpa said no. But I served in a company of heroes.
Lessons in Leadership, Band of Brothers is a production of Changing Hearts and Minds, hosted by Jeff Adamick on the Change Your POV podcast network. You can find other amazing shows on the network by going over to changeyourpov.com. Huge thanks goes out to all the amazing guests featured in the episodes of this series. First, our very own network hosts, Eddie Lazary and Bennett Tanton, hosts of Change Your POV podcast and Attack Friday. Dwayne France, host of Headspace and Timing, Andrew McDowell, host of Neophyte in the Woods, and our newest host, Benjamin Loth, hosting a show releasing soon called Branding with Benjamin. Special thanks goes out to some amazing podcast hosts who have donated their time and opinions to the series. Sam Culper of Breakers Podcast, Brad Taylor of Sofa Kings Podcast, Nick Giglio of Conspiracy Geeks Podcast, and last but certainly not least, to the man who probably had the biggest role in making Band of Brothers the series that it is today, a staple amongst military ranks and revered by all who have worn the uniform. Here's a huge salute to you, Captain Dale Dye. Owner of Warriors Inc., Dale also has a new film in the making and is planning on using veterans to be part of the cast and crew. To learn more about this and to get the links to all of the podcasts and podcast hosts mentioned, head on over to changeyourpov.com/Band of Brothers, all one word. If you like this series, share it with someone you think would like it too. Thanks for listening, and in the words of Dick Winters, I thank God for seeing me through the day of days and prayed I would make it through D+1. I also promised that if some way I could get home again, I would find a nice, peaceful town and spend the rest of my life in peace.